Hi everyone, we're going to do a quick demo on the ink separations by paper chromatography lab. All right, so as we're collecting our equipment, you are going to want 3 or more black pens, ideally. If you can't get black, then maybe purple, gray, brown, something very dark. So it's hopefully a mixture of a few different colors. You're also going to want some water. I've got a little container of water here just labeled so it's ready. You're going to need 2 other solvents. We call these organic solvents because they're mainly made out of carbons. So something like an isopropyl alcohol, maybe something micellar water that you might clean makeup off with. Nail polish remover is cheap and works great. Also even some kind of like hard liquor is ethanol and water. Okay, so those are a couple of ideas. You're also going to need 1 to 3 cups, okay? So 1 is fine. Glass is better than plastic just for this week because these organic compounds tend to dissolve plastic because organic compounds made out of carbon, plastic made out of carbon, so those dissolve in each other. So you need at least 1 cup, preferably 3 if you want to see things all at once. If you have to use plastic, that's fine, but just be aware you want to dump your solvent out as soon as you're done because it will start to dissolve on the bottom, okay? You're also going to want 3 or more different types of paper. So you should have received 4 little pieces of chromatography paper in your lab envelope that you got from LBCC, but maybe you grab some printer paper, even a really sturdy coffee filter. I have pink construction paper, but I would recommend white construction paper if you have some drawing paper. Just 3 different types of paper. They don't all have to work, but we have to try them all, okay? Also, I would recommend either a ruler or something just to be able to draw a straight line, a pencil of some variety, and then you might want to find other things when you get to the creative part of the experiment. Important safety and waste notes. Always rinse your hands well. These organic plastic or these plastic cups will dissolve in organic solvents. Use the smallest amount possible of each solvent. Anything that you're using that is organic, make sure your space is well ventilated and follow all of the warnings on the label of any chemical we ever use. All right, so let's look at ink separations on 3 types of paper. And so for this piece, I want to get 3 different types of paper and 3 different inks, okay? So you want to use a relatively consistent size of paper. If the ones you received were about this size, so maybe 6 centimeters by 3 or 4 centimeters, check that that's going to fit into whatever container you're using, all right? And make sure that the glass container you're using is flat across the bottom. That's going to help this experiment work better. So you don't want something that's like really rounded or something like that. So I have some stiff chromatography paper. I have some printer paper cut to the same size. And then I'm going to, for my 3rd one, use a coffee filter here, and I can just hold it and cut that to the same size. So you can see I'm working with 3 glass containers. I wasn't able to find a 3rd exact one, so 3 similar, 3 markers, and then I've got my 3 different types of paper, okay? Got a ruler ready, and so the next thing I'm gonna do is use my ruler, or whatever kind of straight edge you have, to draw a line in pencil about 1 centimeter up the paper. All right, or a little bit more. Better to do a little more than a little bit less. So I've got a pencil line on all 3 papers, okay? Next up, we're going to add a spot of ink along the line and label those, okay? So this is gonna be the order that I work in. I've got Mr. Sketch. I'm gonna draw a circle of Mr. Sketch ink on each of these. And then I'm going to do a Sharpie. Might want to test your inks ahead of time. My sketch is looking pretty weak. And then I've got a Crayola. And so same order. I want to be super organized. So I'm going to write Sketch here, Sharpie, Crayola. All right. So label each of those, Sketch, Sharpie, Crayola. And I want to put on the top so I can keep track of this, what solvent I'm using. So on all of these, I'm using water. So I've got my prepared and labeled papers. I'm gonna get some water, and I've got my 3 glass containers. You might even label those containers if you want to. So container 1, container 2, container 3, and then I'm gonna pour a little bit of water into each of these, just enough to basically cover the bottom, okay? So about a centimeter or so of water on the bottom. The important thing is that the water depth is less than this depth, so we want the water to come up about halfway here, okay? So once I've got that water in all of them, you want to have a timer ready to go so you can keep an eye on the time. I'm going to gently take my paper and I want to set it flat down in, not crooked like that, but flat down into my water. So I'm going to set it in and let it lean against the side of the container. And ideally the water will be able to run straight up the paper. This will work better for some papers than others. And so now I'm going to let this just kind of sit here, and you can see the ink starting to get pulled up by the water in some of these. And you want to give this a good 5 to 15 minutes to watch those inks run. I'm going to show you an alternate way that you can do this too if you're having this issue I'm having in the middle where the paper just kind of fell over. So you can see over time as this ink is running up, you can take this out and let it dry once it's up. Now, like I said, if you're having trouble with the papers kind of collapsing on you, get something like a chopstick or a popsicle stick or just a twig from outside, and you can tape your paper onto that stick, or you can also use like a binder clip or something like that to clip it in place, all right? And so then when you fill up your cup, what you want to do is just put more water in. And you might want to kind of gauge this, see, okay, I need this to reach all the way up to my line, so you're going to need a little extra water or whatever solvent you're doing with this. But then I should be able to hang this in, if you set it up right. And when I hang it in, now that should help your inks be able to run more straight up, and you can see that that paper is just straight down into the water. So that is a nice little hack for making these inks run a little bit cleaner. So as you can see here, I'm demonstrating spectacular failures. This first paper didn't really soak the water up. This one soaked it up really well, and this one also didn't really soak it up, okay? And so our goal here is to be finding our favorite paper so we can redo this. Hopefully the chromatography paper that we sent to you will work very well no matter what. But you will see that this new method I used is working, I would say, the best out of all of these. This is ideally what you're looking for, is straight lines of ink running up the paper. And you want to stop this before they get to the top. So this is a really good point where I'm going to pull this out of the water. And I'm going to say, hey, that worked better than everything else here. So therefore, that's my best paper, and I'm going to use that for the next part. So again, this is the type of result you're looking for, where the inks run up. And in this one, I would say I can tell a difference between the inks, right? Sketch had some orange pigments, Sharpie didn't move, and then Crayola had like blue and purple kind of pigments that move far up. So I'm going to cut 3 pieces of this paper now for part B. But before I do that, I'm going to make sure I take a picture of all of this, set it aside, dump all these solutions out, and then I'll be ready for part B. Part B, I want 3 different solvents now, so I'm going to use water again as one of them. I'm going to do alcohol as a second, and I'm going to do nail polish remover as a third, okay? So you choose whatever 3 depending on what you've got around. Same 3 inks, so I've got my inks again, and I'm going to prepare my 3 identical pieces of paper, my favorite paper from last round. So let me do that. So I've got my 3 papers ready here, and I'm looking to put the solvent on top here. So water, alcohol, that was my isopropyl alcohol. And then if you aren't sure what's in your nail polish remover, say, look at the ingredients. Acetone, top ingredient, is going to be your solvent that you want to list. So I'm going to write acetone here. So I'm going to put a little bit of solvent in the bottom of each of my containers. Again, just enough to cover the bottom. So there's my water, there's my alcohol, and there's my acetone. Okay, and remember I emptied those containers out after last time. Now I really liked how it worked with the chopstick, or again you could use really any type of stick that you like found outside. So I'm going to do that again. So I've got my chopstick with that paper taped onto it, and I'm going to do that for all of my papers. with the goal here being that this paper is going to drip down into the solution and go straight down in, okay? So I'm gonna stick each of these in here and we'll see what happens. So it's been a couple of minutes and you can see that my inks are starting to move up the paper. You will notice that depending on the solvent, the separations are a bit different. So for example, the middle ink is Sharpie. In water, it doesn't move at all. When we use something that is, we'll learn a less polar solvent, acetone, notice that middle Sharpie is starting to dissolve. A good way to get Sharpie off of things is dissolve it in nail polish remover. That's what this is showing us. And then keep in mind also the paper is our stationary phase. And so then the liquid, the solvent, is our mobile phase. Whatever moves with the mobile phase is like the mobile phase. And by like, we mean it has a similar polarity. So if we look at on the far left there, the sketch markers, we can see the blue dot at top. That means the blue is the most water-soluble pigment. And then we can see that the orange has not moved as much, so the orange is less water-soluble. The blue is more like the water, the orange is less like the water. And then you might see some different patterns depending on the solvent here. Same ink on the left there, there's a pink spot moving. So the pink is very similar to the alcohol because it's at the top. And then over here in the acetone, same ink on the left, there's something bluish greenish there that is the most like the acetone. So you're gonna let these all run till they're within a centimeter or so from the top, and then you're gonna take them off. Show you my messy kitchen. I just kind of invented this way to tape them up on my cabinet to dry. That worked out pretty well. But definitely whatever you do, be creative with the things that you have around. Everyone's setup should look a little bit different, and that's part of being a creative scientist. And just a reminder too, I've pulled those out now, but it does take a bit more solvent to do those hanging chromatograms. So your last part is to use your creativity. Hopefully you've been filling in data as you go. So like our very first one that we did, our first paper that we used was chromatography paper. In that first part A, all of our solvents were water, and then our inks, we used the sketch ink, we used the Sharpie, and we used the Crayola. And so you would want to describe what we see on the little paper here, okay? So for the sketch ink, you might describe that there was orange at the bottom, and then pink, and then blue. You could even sketch that here if you wanted to. And then the Sharpie, I might say that there was no movement. And then for the Crayola, I might say that there was black and blue pigments at the top. And so you're going to have those type of observations for your chromatograms, all right? So for our last part, again, you're going to be creative. Ideally, you want something that'll work well. So I really liked how that coffee filter worked, and I liked the variety of these solvents. So I'm going to do just one change. That's all you want to do. I'm going to use the same coffee filter, the same solvents. You don't have to dump them out until the end, but I'm going to do some different ink colors. All right, so I'm curious what these 3 ink colors will be. All right, you might choose to try some different papers. You might choose to grab some different black inks, but just change one thing. So I'm going to keep same solvents, same paper, change the markers. You might decide that you thought the ethanol or the acetone was really fun, so you dump these out and you do acetone in all of them, but then we use those same 3 markers that we've been doing. So you are going to try acetone, sorry, not with those same 3, but you'll try maybe acetone with 3 different papers, okay? So be creative, try whatever you want here. I'll just set mine up and then you'll be ready to get to work, or you'll be finished with your lab. Just a final note, as you're prepping these, you can see that you always want to label. I labeled my solvents, I labeled what my inks are. Some inks will really spread a lot on your paper, and you don't want huge dots, because if your dots are huge, then all your inks are going to run together. So you want relatively small dots depending on your paper. But yeah, so I've got my final round of experiments ready with some new ink colors, and you will come up with some cool experiment too. I look forward to seeing your results.